Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Labor, Health, and Human Services and Education Subcommittee. It's great to have everybody here today, and again, here in November, another hearing, and so we're glad to be here, and so we especially want to welcome Commissioner Martin O'Malley to this subcommittee for the first hearing for Social Security in over a decade. The last hearing held by this subcommittee was around 10 years ago by our friend on this subcommittee and our former colleague, Jack Kingston. First, I want to acknowledge Commissioner O'Malley's efforts to come meet with me. You did a few months ago. You came by, and we had a very good in-person meeting together. I have chaired this subcommittee for the past 2 years, and I would say less than half of the leadership of the agencies that are funded in this bill have come to sit down with me. So, Commissioner, I appreciate that you are one of the few who see the value in sit-down, in-person discussions. And I thank you for being one of the few exceptions to this administration. However, I want to strongly encourage you to take that same courtesy that you showed me and extend it to the American public served by your employees. Less than half of the Social Security Administration employees are reporting to work. According to a report published by OMB, recently published by OMB, I would urge you to make it a priority to have employees return to work. Field offices are frontline direct service to America's seniors. Anything less than full resumption of activities, I think, would be a disservice to the taxpayers. Prior audit reports have highlighted concerns with Social Security Administration's ability to measure productivity in telework, and noted that the agency did not restrict telework by job position. I think it's unacceptable that an agency with more than 50,000 employees would not have some policy of determining whether an employee's job is inherent frontline customer service. I also want to note the concern with the unprecedented abrupt closure of field offices for 2 days earlier this year. We were unable to find precedent for such an action by the Social Security Administration, and your office provided almost no notice to the public to reschedule the meetings. For an agency that acknowledges its unique role in customer service, I would expect a better understanding of the importance of public service to in-person options. The work you do impacts every single American, and I say that because a lot of agencies don't have a direct connection with every American citizen, but the Social Security Administration does, and they deserve more than a few days' notice of office closure. Since FY 2014, the Social Security Administration has received an increase of its appropriations nearly every year. Over the past decade, the administrative funding to run the agency has increased by nearly $2 billion. And while I do recognize the agency has not received the amount requested in the President's budget for some of those years, such an increase does represent an amount far greater than other agencies and programs in this bill. There are several programs that have not received a single increase in that same time span. These are programs helping children and families in child welfare system, assistance with the purchase of low-income medication, and maintaining independence in their homes for seniors. The reality is that the nation's fiscal situation has forced Congress to make priorities. For much of the past decade, discretionary spending caps have been agreed to by both parties to rein in out of the control beltway spending and deficits. Such spending limits have curtailed the practice of routinely giving agencies inflationary adjustments, and in many cases, administrative needs have had to compete with other spending priorities like funding special needs education programs, job training, and maintaining America's lead in biomedical innovation. This subcommittee has had to make some tough decisions considering limited resources, the same type of challenges that everyday Americans face on a day-to-day basis for the past few years with rising inflation and stagnant wages. At the end of the day, we're responsible with making the prudent decisions with the funding we have. Now, I'd like to take just a second to spend some time to mention the use of the Social Security Administration's resources, specifically regarding its employees. In September of this year, the Inspector General released a advisory report discussing the Social Security Administration's use of premium pay, including overtime pay. And it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the agency has no policy regarding an employee's use of overtime on paid leave days, meaning that the agency permits employees to earn overtime on the exact same days they're claiming paid leave. In a small sample, the OIG found over 750 instances where the Social Security Administration paid employees for overtime on the exact same days the employee claimed paid leave. In a small subset of cases, the employee claimed a full 8 hours of paid leave and was still paid overtime for the same day. In addition, the agency only provides guidance on the amount of overtime given to the employees. The agency guideline states employees should receive no more than 18 hours of overtime a week, but the agency has no policy on instances when employees exceed this amount. In a 6-year span, the OIG found that more than 3,000 examples of employees working more than 18 hours of overtime in 1 week. For a subset of employees, the Social Security Administration paid the employees more than $1,000 hours of overtime, and that's equivalent to hiring another worker. To understand how much money we're talking about per employee, in one example, an employee's base pay was around $85,000. They earned nearly $95,000 in overtime. Many employees are doubling their salary, and the agency would get 50% more work and spend the same amount of money if they just made a hire opposed to excessive use of overtime. Therefore, one option to help stretch limited funding further would be sound and fair policies regarding the abuse of premium pay throughout the agency. In addition to weak rules around premium pay, the agency also has weak policies regarding outside employment and instances of conflict of interest and misconduct among the Social Security employees. In June of this year, the OIG found that although the Social Security Administration advises voluntary reporting of outside work for most staff, only 6% submitted required financial disclosures that include such employment. This lack of a defined requirement to report outside employment, providing zero transparency for agency management, has led to cases of unauthorized Social Security Administration system access for outside jobs. In one case, an employee assessed databases for over 3 years to share sensitive information with an outside employer for financial gain. This lack of reporting requirement for outside employment is not the norm among federal agencies. For example, the Department of Health and Human Services, the largest civilian agency and overseen by this subcommittee, has codified this requirement. The Department of Health and Human Services has made it clear that an employee wanting to engage in outside activities need approval first and must submit a form requesting such approval for outside activity. If there are changes in the employee's duties or the outside organization, a new form is required. The Postal Service and Department of Housing and Urban Development also require employees to seek approval for most outside activities. It's troubling that an agency of this size, with a workforce that by necessity must have direct access to a vast amount of sensitive information on most Americans, has no such similar requirements. This is yet another example of where enhancing the Social Security Administration's core management practices, such as implementing effective policies, could help prevent conflicts of interest and ensure employees act ethically and making sure taxpayers' interests are a priority without exploiting the system. In that same OIG report, yet another Social Security Administration employee was found to have spent over 2 years using leave to manage their own personal business. Unfortunately, there have been far too many cases of Social Security employees engaged in fraudulent activity connected to their federal employment. Administrative law judges have been found guilty of disability fraud in some cases resulting in hundreds of millions of taxpayer losses. Supervisors have been caught drawing off the supplemental security income benefits into private accounts for personal gain. Workers have stolen beneficiary personnel information and rerouted Social Security payments. In several cases, the fraud occurred over the course of years of employment before being caught. There are cases occurring throughout the nation. These have occurred in Colorado, in Kentucky, in Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. Employee misconduct remains a real risk throughout the agency. At the last hearing for this agency, when Mr. Kingston was here, he brought up several of the challenges facing the agency. Many of its employees are in retirement range. Numerous Social Security Administration local offices have been closed due to budget restraints, and the office of the Social Security Administration location serving the public continues to grow shorter. At the same time, the number of people that file for their Social Security benefits has grown significantly, with the baby boomer generation reaching retirement age, and a record number of people have applied for disability benefits. It is obvious that finding solutions other than just money is imperative to addressing these mounting pressures. Mr. Kingston encouraged the agency to take a serious look at its service delivery approach and how it interacts with the public. The agency clearly needs to examine how it can better serve the public online. While Social Security Administration has moved some elements to its services online, it is my understanding that either they don't function very well or the online portion does not address a meaningful share of the process. And so either way, the public is required to seek service at their local Social Security Administration office, and I'm sad to say that in 10 years, little has changed. The agency has struggled to implement IT changes that result in correct payments to the correct beneficiaries. Recent reports estimate that the Social Security Administration made over $72 billion in overpayments between 2015 and 2022. That's an average of $9 billion a year. And let me say, while I understand you have made efforts to improve the collection of process on these overpayments, and let the record reflect that, it certainly seems reasonable to ask if there are easier options would be, if the easier option would be to correct payments in the first place. Spending scarce resources trying to recoup payments, much of which will not be able to be repaid, hardly seems to be the solution that we should be making a priority. An independent assessment of the Social Security Administration's IT modernization plan by the accounting firm Ernst & Young concluded the agency's modernization programs was not effectively designed, and in some instances, the agency failed to implement or comply with its own policies and procedures. The audit also found in some instances the cost and return on investments were not being tracked. In fact, in the past few years, spending on IT has decreased by more than $80 million. Multiple agencies have had to face the challenges of fiscal discipline and a growing population, and I want to hear today about how Social Security Administration is leading the path in creating a sustainable customer service model that meets the needs of the public and balances the interests of the workforce and the taxpayer. Again, I sincerely thank you for coming today before us. There's a lot here, but I think these are some things that we do need to talk about. I would now like to yield the gentlelady from Connecticut, the ranking member DeLauro, and after she makes her opening statement, I would like to recognize the member for the great state of Maryland, Mr. Hoyer.
Thank you, Chairman Adderholt, for holding this hearing on the Social Security Administration. My deep thanks go to today's witness, Commissioner Martin O'Malley, for appearing today. And I want to thank you for your leadership of this agency, which serves millions of seniors and Americans with disabilities, and for your forthright approach to sharing information with the Congress. We really appreciate all that you have done in a very relatively short period of time at the Social Security Administration, and we welcome you to the Labor HHS Subcommittee. I must say that while I am delighted you are here, and I look forward to today's conversation on the funding needs of Social Security the administration. I'm disturbed that this committee appears disinterested in completing our work on time. We are 1 month from the expiration of the continuing resolution that we passed in September, without so much as a top-line agreement, let alone a final labor, health, and human services education bill that can become law. That deserves some scrutiny. This committee and this Congress should be laser-focused on finishing appropriations bills that can become law before the end of the year. Some of my colleagues want to delay our work until well into next year by passing yet another continuing resolution. America is demanding change. They want border security, public safety, help with extreme weather, natural disasters. Those are addressed by government funding bills, and continuing resolutions delay government getting to work. Forcing agencies to operate from continuing resolution to continuing resolution without consistent, predictable resources hurts the American people. It worsens the issues we examined with each hearing, and Democrats are ready and willing to negotiate. It is time for our Republican colleagues to come to the table. For this subcommittee, it is our responsibility to finish full-year appropriations for health, education, and labor programs, including the administrative expenses of the Social Security Administration, such as staff salaries and expenses, information technology, and buildings and facilities, which include over 1,200 field offices that serve communities across this country. And indeed, when I was chair, we increased investments in the Social Security Administration, an average of $339 million per year, with an increase of $785 million in fiscal year 2023, when we had Democratic majorities in both the House and the Senate. Our investments enabled the Social Security Administration to hire field office staff, allowed the states to hire desperately needed disability determination staff. But SSA needs much more to be able to adequately serve Americans who are duly entitled to receive Social Security. The partisan and extreme labor HHS bill the majority proposed for 2025, which was, by the way, never voted on by the full House of Representatives, included deep and harmful cuts to the Social Security Administration. That would mean closings, shorter operating hours at Social Security field offices, and delayed benefits to seniors and to those with disabilities. A cut to the administrative budget of your agency is a de facto cut to Social Security, because fewer Americans will be able to access their earned benefits. House Republicans may claim that they are not touching Social Security benefits, but in fact, indeed, they undermine the Social Security Administration. They are ultimately destroying the resources needed to carry out its mission, hurting seniors and disabled Americans. That is the goal here. This is their favorite play out of Grover Norquist, if people think about him many years ago, Grover Norquist playbook, which he talked about shrinking government until it can drown it in a bathtub. If you defund an agency to the point of dysfunction, then it becomes easier to mislead the public into believing that that agency is not working. In other words, Republicans want Americans to believe their government is broken, and they are willing to break the government to prove it. Republicans are trying to break Social Security, while SSA is trying to serve more Americans than ever before. With less resources, Republicans are in effect cutting Social Security. Staffing shortages and historic beneficiary growth driven by the retirement of the baby boom generation have created a customer service crisis at the Social Security Administration, with significant backlogs, excessive employee workload, workloads and delays in issuing disability decisions that this committee must help the agency to address. In Georgia, the average wait for an initial decision on disability benefits is more than 14 months. And people are waiting for over a year in Texas and Maryland. Over 1 million people are waiting for disability determinations around the country, with over 100,000 waiting in both California and Florida. Over 80,000 in Georgia, over 40,000 in Louisiana, and over 30,000 in Alabama. A field office in Cleveland, Ohio, was forced to shut down for over a month due to staff losses. And in rural areas such as Cody, Wyoming, the local office is only open 1 day per week. SSA simply cannot adequately serve the American people, especially in harder-to-reach rural communities, with current staff and resource levels. Commissioner O'Malley, in your testimony, you note that nearly 30,000 Americans died in 2023 while waiting for their disability decisions from the Social Security Administration. 30,000 Americans. That is an outrage. We cannot accept this or allow this to continue. The Social Security Administration is tasked with serving more Americans than ever before and with fewer staff than they had 50 years ago. Imagine how we could serve seniors and disabled Americans if Republicans committed to investing in Social Security as opposed to gutting it. I would like to hear more from you, Commissioner O'Malley, about the downstream ramifications of this staffing shortage on the SSA's ability to serve the American people and to provide the American people with the benefits that they have earned and that they are entitled to. Social Security turns 90 years old next year, and before the program was created in 1935, half of America's seniors were impoverished. Today, Social Security serves as the primary income source for the majority of seniors. We must ensure this agency's legacy of pulling millions out of poverty continues unabated. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, provide the funding that is needed for the Social Security Administration to accomplish its mission, its goals, and making sure the seniors in this nation are safeguarded and can live in some economic security in their older years. I thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. I won't make an opening statement, but I did want to introduce the commissioner, who needs no introduction, but he is, we're all very proud of Martin O'Malley, who grew up in the Washington suburbs and moved to the Baltimore region of our state, which is north of Washington, and became its mayor and was reelected as its mayor and did an excellent job as its mayor. He then became our governor and was reelected for a second term, and so has served our state very ably. And he now serves our country very ably, and President Biden asked him to head up an agency which obviously needed some management skills that I think he has brought to the office. Mr. Chairman, you raised some significant issues that the IG has raised, and I'm sure that the commissioner will deal with those, but I want to welcome him to the committee and thank him for his service.
Thanks for being here, and the floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member DeLauro, members of the committee, Congressman Hoyer, one and all, Social Security is the greatest act of caring and compassion that the people of the United States have ever enacted for one another. It is a program that protects the dignity of every individual. It lifts people out of poverty. It is the greatest example of the common good we share put into action. So I thank you for holding this critically important hearing. And as you pointed out yourself, Mr. Chairman, In fact, this is the very first appropriations hearing that Social Security has been granted in 10 years. As a result, the customer service challenge we face today at your Social Security Administration is perhaps the most daunting in its 89-year history. And that's saying a lot. 30,000 Americans dying, waiting in line, more than ever before in the history of the disability program, which President Eisenhower signed into law in 1954. But the reason for this crisis is not a mystery. Social Security today is struggling to serve more customers than ever with staffing that has been reduced to a 50-year low. People of my generation, the baby boomers, continue to swell the ranks of our active beneficiaries, and 10 years of blind neglect has reduced this agency's staffing to a 50-year low. This hard but central truth is the underlying context of our discussion here today, and I'm glad to get into those other matters. Go as granular as you would like, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for the time you gave me in your office. This hard but central truth is the underlying context of everything we've struggled with this last year. Social Security being forced to serve more and more customers with fewer and fewer staff, and the result, to no surprise, I should think to anyone, is a decline in customer service, a crisis in customer service. The American people deserve better. In fact, they already paid for better because most of the administrative cost actually comes from the FICA that they paid every 2 weeks. So you could restore the staffing of Social Security entirely out of the trust fund without adding a penny to the debt. And it would only advance the so-called depletion date by 30 days. So why are we doing this to ourselves? Why are we doing this to senior citizens in Alabama, Maryland, Connecticut, and places all across the United States? I know you've received their calls. I know you've heard their cries. So I hope you'll be heartened to learn that in recent months, notwithstanding the gaping, growing mismatch between rising customers and declining numbers of staff, reduced, I should say, numbers of staff, because 75% of our budget, Mr. Chairman, is staff. So when with a $500 million cut means we have to cut 500 million people out of places all over the United States. But nonetheless, we've taken serious actions this year to achieve real measurable progress on some of our toughest problems. We have reduced the backlog of administrative law judge hearings. You know, that's kind of the third level of appeal after they go through the state. We've reduced that now from 450 days at the beginning of the year, average processing time, and now we've gotten that down to 278 days. We hadn't gotten it that low in 20 or 30 years. We've driven down the wait time on the 1-800 number, which was routinely an hour or an hour and a half, and in October we got it down to 12 and a half minutes. We've eliminated the clawback cruelty that it would intercept 100% of a beneficiary's check if they didn't call us back on that 800 number to work out a repayment plan. And we've cleared more initial disability cases now for 22 weeks in a row than have been opened on the front end. And finally, we have driven up overall productivity by 6.2% over last year, which is one of the biggest year-over-year increases that we've ever had in productivity. These recent gains are important. I'm proud of the men and women of Social Security. It's like they're running up a downward moving escalator with fewer and fewer colleagues to do the work for the American people. But there is this growing mismatch will continue without your help, and we need your help. True story. Prior to 2018, through Democratic and Republican administrations alike, Social Security was allowed to operate on 1.2% overhead compared to the benefits paid. Now, if you were to compare that to a private insurance company, and Social Security is akin to an insurance company, Allstate operates on 19% overhead for benefits paid. Liberty Mutual, Liberty Biberty, operates on 23% overhead for benefits paid. And when we operated well, prior to 2018, it was at just 1.2%. Mr. Chairman, that's American effectiveness. That's American efficiency. That's an American government that works. But now we've been reduced to even less than 1%. and with it, staffing down to a 50-year low, even as our ranks grow to an all-time high. And the result is customer service staffing has been reduced to a 50-year low, and sadly, for no good reason. The American people are now denied the customer service that they paid for at the same time that they paid for their benefits. What good are benefits if you can't get through on the phone to access them? If you're unfortunate to become disabled at work and you've earned your benefits, what good is it to make you wait for a year or 2 years in order to get those benefits? The president's budget for Social Security would be a big step in the right direction. The $15.4 billion would allow us to greatly restore the field offices that I know we all care so much about, that have been, by the way, greatly hollowed out over the last 10 years. I encourage all of you, visit one, visit two. I've visited 100. There's a lot more windows than there are staff. And it's not because we're lazy. It's not because we don't show up for work. It's because there are fewer of us. The president's budget would allow us to greatly restore staffing at the field offices, the state DDS offices, the 1-800 number, which suffers 24% attrition rate, and it would allow us to finally to make some meaningful headway in modernizing our very old technology. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for acknowledging that the modernization budget has dwindled to nothing. You know, when you're operating on COBOL legacy systems without any IT modernization, more and more of that budget every year is taken up with keeping it taped together. In fact, any amount less than the president's budget would have severe consequences for every American. We cannot stand back and watch this agency crater. It is a sacred promise to the people of the United States. They worked their entire life so Social Security would be there for them. Underfunding Social Security's customer service needs for the American people, or cutting it by $500 million, as this committee voted to do, and I do believe that's the first time a $500 million cut has ever been passed out of Appropriations Committee, Subcommittee, would mean field office closures. It would mean deeper staff reductions and furloughs. It would mean more people dying while waiting for their initial disability benefits. So, in conclusion, I continue to be inspired every single day by the honesty, the integrity, the hard work, the courage, the bravery, the caring, and the compassion of the men and women of the Social Security Administration. Mr. Chairman, it's been one of the highest honors of my life to be in this battle with them this last year on behalf of America and at the request of the President. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I appreciate your comments and your opening statement. And I mentioned in my opening statement that many of us on this subcommittee are concerned by the high levels of telework across Social Security Administration. Field office staff, the direct line service to America's seniors, are only in the office 3 days per week, and over 60% of your staff in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore are in the office less than 3 days a week. I pointed out that the previous audit reports have noted that the Social Security Administration does not restrict telework by job position. Not only does the agency rank at the bottom across the government for in-person work, but the telework policy has not been designed considering the agency's primary mission. According to a September report provided to us by your office in FY 2024, the average wait time for Social Security Administration 1-800 number was 28 minutes. The average processing time for an initial disability application was 7.5 months, and the average processing time for hearing decisions was 11 months. These numbers are essentially unchanged from FY 2022 when you go back and look at them. My question to you, Commissioner, will you commit today to bringing back those 58,000 employees back into the office?
Mr. Chairman, they never stopped. They never stopped working. We'll unpack this a little bit. I made a change to the telework policy. In fact, I made it as soon as I got there on February 2nd. And I brought some photographic proof. the parking lot at the Social Security headquarters in Baltimore. This is another view of that same parking lot. This is another view of that same parking lot. It's a big parking lot, and it's a big headquarters. And the Federal News Network at the time of that change said that perhaps Social Security has set the new balance in this post-COVID world where people compete based on wages and health benefits and also work-life balance. This agency, in fact, without any thanks, you know, the field offices were opened as soon as there were vaccines available. And they're actually open longer hours now than they were before when they used to close at earlier hours. So, and if we hadn't been a leader in telework in the second term of President Obama, could you imagine how they would have kept the checks cranking out when the evacuation had to happen? So we opened the field offices right away. We're actually in the mid-range among large agencies in terms of the balance between telework and in-person work. And further, the numbers you cited about service improvement are dated. If you want to see the live, like up-to-date to the month service delivery, on Social Security's website, there's an icon called Security Stat, and with 60 days, I put up for all of you and the people in charge, the citizens of the United States, to see the trend lines over the last 7 years of your reductions to this agency's staff and capabilities, and the trend lines from the beginning of the year. Every major service area is being improved by the men and women of Social Security. And, Mr. Chairman, it's being done in a way and with a degree of openness and transparency that exists nowhere else in any federal agency. Every 2 weeks through Security Stat, we drive down bad things like wait times. The number you cited on the 1-800 number, we've actually reduced that in October to 12.5 minutes. Last year, it was routinely, could be an hour, hour and a half, depending on when you call. So every major trend line this year has been improved. Our productivity is up. I believe that we've achieved the right balance between telework and on-site work. I'm there 5 days a week. Our headquarters, I think, is at the top. We have more on-site work than any other federal agency. And let me say finally that I mentioned in my opening remark the fact that the ALJ backlog, which was horrendous, that's where people died waiting in line, like in 2017, we've gotten that down to a record low. And you know how? Because our workloads, our hearing loads, are portable. In other words, before COVID, 90% of claimants and their attorneys wanted an in-person hearing. That's totally flipped now. They don't want in-person hearings. They want to do it by video conference or they want to do it by teleconference. So why is that important? Because it allows people wherever they are to attend the hearing telephonically or by video. So when we're lining up things like vocational experts, doctors, the claimants themselves, we don't have time on a docket in person that has to be postponed because one of those 6 players couldn't show up because of traffic or sickness or what have you. And it's because, so which means that, say, a claimant who's in Seattle might actually have an ALJ judge in Alabama. Secondly, a big chunk of our employees are teleservice. You won't find in the private sector anywhere a teleservice center that operates making everybody come in all the time, 5 days a week, because it would be stupid. It's more effective to see it. And I would, if you don't believe me, I would encourage you to ask Chairman Ferguson, because he came to Security Stat. He saw our new platform, which, oh, by the way, saves money once we got off of the clunky Verizon system. And he saw how we monitored the teleservice agents real time on the internet. We can see them minute by minute, whether they're on the phone. We have flags on it so that their supervisors can see, oh, wow, Martin's light is flashing red. He must have a troublesome case. I'm going to send him a text. Can I help you? So I encourage you to come. I mean, the degree of openness, transparency, and measures of productivity, which are up 6.2%, I think run counter to what that old Mau. I think this agency's moved so fast, Mr. Chairman. I don't blame you for not seeing the progress yet, but
Yeah. Well, let me
it is
just
being
follow
made.
up, and I see that an employee, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Social Security field office, they're only required to be in the office 3 days a week. Is that correct?
They work 5 days a week, correct. They do teleconferences Lots of our claimants would rather do it by
And
phone.
I guess the question, how do you ensure constant, reliable service to Americans with such a policy in place? And are the positions with more customer service facing responsibilities in field office allow the same amount of telework? And I guess, and then also, does the employees union play any role in determining this?
No, the employees union, well, the employees union is the elected representatives of the employees. I meet with them every month. I meet with the advocates every month. I meet with my command staff around the city security stat table every 2 weeks on a rotating basis, and have since I first went there. So I meet with everybody regularly, because that's how I get the feedback to know whether the things we're doing are working or not working. So I think your question, if I'm understanding the call of your question, Mr. Chairman, is how do we know they're being productive?
Right.
Yes, sir. All of the main lines of service that we provide as Social Security Administration are online for everyone to see. Help me out with that tab. I've got open data that could choke a donkey. Can you show me the tab on the? So let me. The way we know they're productive, Mr. Chairman, is this. For the teleservice centers, every agent has a scorecard. And we've brought back the international colors of good to bad, red, yellow, green. And we measure 4 different things across every agent, including a constantly on medallia survey of customer service, which we have driven up to an all-time high in terms of that response.
I guess what I'm asking, but you really don't feel like there's a need right now to bring back in the office?
No, sir, I don't. I think we have, if we didn't have a better balance, we wouldn't have driven up productivity by 62.2%, the biggest uptick in 5 years. And that's all audited. If we didn't have an effective balance, we wouldn't be able to serve more customers than ever with staffing that Congress has reduced to a 50-year low. And here's another thing. We have this thing called a tool called the Field Office Optimizer that shows us in real time what the wait times are in any field office. They vary across the country. But some of them that have the largest wait times are also the most productive.
Well, let me
because
just,
employees
my
that haven't
time,
quit
my
are
time is
serving
out. I
more
don't want to
people.
take from my ranking member, but like I said, let me just go on record so that many on the subcommittee and in the House, we're very concerned about the high levels of telework across the administration, and we would like to see that addressed in some way. I will now turn to my ranking member, Mr. Laurel.
I would hope that we would be concerned with the productivity, however that's achieved. I mean, that is the issue. And to base the questions that we have or the concerns that we have on data and, information that has been proven rather than on speculation or pre-existing notions about what works or doesn't work. The best thing is not to be anecdotal, but the best thing is to look at what the increase in services, the decrease in wait times, all of the measures that the commissioner has laid out. I think that there's real clarity there. And I'm going to go back. I will ask something about the disabilities and how to dealing with the backlog there. But I have, I think, more fundamental question, Commissioner. As I said in my opening statement, and I wanted to see if you would agree with this, do you agree with me that a cut in the administration of the Social Security Administration is a de facto cut to Social Security? And tell us how.
Well, it absolutely is, Madam Chair. The people, all their lives when they work, part of their FICA that they pay in all year so that they don't die under a bridge in poverty in their old age, goes to Social Security Trust Fund. And that's the fund that allows us to pay benefits, the one that we racked up a big surplus in, a reserve surplus, so we could cover the years of the baby boomers. At the same time, though, those dollars were also supposed to pay for the overhead of this agency. And until pretty recently, that overhead, that 1.2% that I talked about, that was always mandatory spending because most of it came out of the same FICA tax rather than general federal revenues. But for some strange reason, maybe it was in the age of caps and those things, the size of our agency, we're the second biggest annual spend compared, only after the Department of Defense.
Let's do an audit there.
So the size of the agency may give you all room to put more focus on labor H. It says a lot that we don't even warrant an S in the name of your committee when we're the second largest spend in the federal government. So a cut to customer service is a cut to the American people's Social Security. They have a right to those benefits. They've earned them. And at the same time, they've already paid for the customer service necessary to effectuate them. I've probably visited 100 field offices in America by now, in many of your districts. And every time, Mr. Chairman, I don't go in the back door. I go in the front door and sit with our people, and I ask them, how long you been waiting? What is it that you need? I've talked to widows who, for the first time, articulate that they are there for survivor benefits. I've talked to grandmothers bringing in their boy grandson for a redetermination. It's not right. It's not right that they should be denied the customer service that they already paid for. And it's a solvable problem. Just like the long-term fiscal health of Social Security is a solvable problem, man, this one's even easier. If you just allowed us to go back to that effective and efficient 1.2%, Mr. Chairman, your Social Security Administration, once again, would be the most effective and efficient in the United States of America.
So in essence, if there's this cut of the magnitude that we're talking about here, we're looking at a substantial delay in people's
Delays and
Social Security.
closures.
Delays and closures. And I won't belabor it now, but if anybody is interested, I do have a chart of every single district, not only the members of this committee, but of the entire Congress, of the number of beneficiaries who receive Social Security, the number of staff that reside in the particular state, the initial disability claims that are pending, and it goes on and on and on. And, you know, there is a notion here, especially when it comes to programs that are dealing with labor HHS, is that less is more. Well, in this case, less is less, and it continues to be less productivity, less efficiency, et cetera, that we're going to be able to do, and we're going to put people's benefits in jeopardy. I'm going to quickly ask you about the improving the wait times on disability claims and your budget request addressing that backlog, please.
Yes, thank you, Ranking Member. The little-known fact, but the initial disability determinations that's made when people are injured at work, they have to apply, and the initial determination of whether that person meets the criteria of the statute, both a medical listing and an inability to do work that they used to do that's widely available in their part of the economy, that initial decision is made by state employees in 50 state offices all across the United States, and most governors don't even know they have them, and the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, but we fund that. So the staffing at those has been reduced from about a little under 15,000 down to 12,000. And therefore, it's kind of like a police department or a school system. A school system with more students and fewer teachers means it takes longer to get to the kids that are in trouble. Police department with fewer police and the same level of calls for service takes them longer to get to the calls for service. So these DDS offices, in one state, in Montana, now 80% of them are trainees. Each one of them is a bit of a Gordian knot to untangle. But we've deployed some better tools, better technology, the use of Imagine, better management intelligence to identify those claimants that are most likely to receive an allowable, and we fast-track them, or the compassionate cases where somebody might have a terminal condition, so we fast-track those. So we've gone now 22 months in a row, and I finally found from my donkey cart some of these things. This is this is on our website, so that's kind of the peak of the disability backlog. We've now closed more cases on the back end every week for the last 22 weeks. We need to keep it going, but a $500 million cut would mean that goes back up, more people die waiting in line. And same with the, this is the bread and butter one. This is retiree, and folks, they've gotten that back up from a low last year of 77% to a high of 87%. So those are some of the things that we look at in productivity. And all of this is, they're all cases. Like they each have a name, a Social Security number. So it's actually relatively, these cats collect a lot of data. And using that data, we've empowered one another to act in a more collaborative and accountable way and deliver better even with the huge hit we've taken in staffing.
Mr. Muhlenar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Commissioner, thanks for being here. I appreciate your service. The House Appropriations Committee has expressed concerns that the SSA's antiquated IT service management system is adversely impacting agency employees' ability to deliver the service and efficiency that Americans, including many of my constituents in Michigan, expects and deserves. And it's been 4 years since the SSA began modernizing its IT service management tools in fiscal year 2021 to improve customer service, optimize operational efficiency, and maximize organizational productivity. Despite this effort, I continue to hear complaints from my constituents that their experience with SSA doesn't meet what they would expect from a 21st century economy.
That's true.
Can you explain why it's taking SSA several years to modernize its IT systems when other organizations, both private and public, seem to do it sooner?
Yes, sir. It comes down to a lack of money. In other words, well, I was one of my many conversations with Chairman Ferguson. He said, well, why can't you make up that yawning gap in the reduction of staff with better IT? And I said, because you haven't increased our IT funding either. And when you level fund the agency's IT budget, what the result of that is that, you know, where, say, 15 years ago, Congressman, you know, you might have had this much that went to keeping the systems, the legacy systems tied together, and then you'd have this much more for modernization. But with 10 years of level funding, more and more is taken up with keeping green screens and COBOL taped together rather than doing the modernization. But we have had one big success is the online, which the White House OMB rated as one of the best website in the federal government. We don't have enough lines of service on there. We would like to put more on there. There's about 8 things that you can do online, and we would like to add more to it. We also recently, on August 22nd, we cut over to a whole new 800 number system with AWS Connect. And that will give us a sort of customer relations management that people are accustomed to receiving from their bank. There's other things we'd like to do on notifying people through text. It's really a lack of investment. And I'm glad you asked that question, because one of my deep concerns about this agency when I depart next Friday is a looming problem on the horizon of antiquated IT systems totally breaking down or being shut down by bad actors.
So if I could just summarize, so what you're saying is the amount that's been spent modernizing really has even struggled to maintain.
Yes, sir. We like to call it modernize. We like to whistle past the lack of funding by giving our people some hope that it's going to be modernized. I mean, we've done a lot of things. I mean, we created there was a tool we created called AMP to automate Medicare-only claims, and that worked really great. We've been able to do some other things like that, cut over to AWS, which also saves us money, by the way, and is going to give us greater capacity. But at the end of the day, this agency hasn't received a modernization fund, I mean, a real investment since Walter Cronkite reported on it in the 1960s. And we used to be a leader in the world.
So, I mean, my constituents would think $1.5 billion is quite an investment.
I know, the numbers are big.
What would be the right number?
The answer to that is a twofold. You know, these CRs hurt us in a lot of ways, including this. I mean, when we have to, you know, put the brakes on and go hiring freeze, that's one hurt. The IT funding really needs to be approximately a $5 billion shot, one time, but without any threat that it will be taken back. With $5 billion in IT modernization, I have no doubt this agency could move to the forefront again in customer service.
And then what would the annual requirement be after that?
Well, right now, the level it's at is kind of what they call in the agency lights on. And even with lights on, we had 2 incidences where the lights went totally off this year. So the ongoing funding would be about what you see right now. That's kind of the lights on maintenance funding. But a one-term shot, Congressman, that we would be able to plan and execute and know that we could get done, because a lot of these modernization, the little ones around the edges, the history over the last 10 years of reductions is that they start them and then they have to stop mid-year because they don't have the funding to complete them. And then a new budget's passed, they start again, and they have to, that's the worst way to do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Hoyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me follow up on what was just discussed. Mr. McCarthy and I and the gentleman from Texas, whose name reminds me right now, Hurd, Congressman Hurd, who headed up the subcommittee at that point in time, joined together and passed a bill on Technology Modernization Fund. It was why the private sector can do it faster and better, because they put aside a capital fund for that, and it's there, which is what the commissioner is saying. It's there, and it will not be taken away. And it will be steady. First of all, it'll be a fund, and then it will be repaid by the agencies over time, but the fund will be there for them to draw on when they can do the modernization. Unfortunately, the administration, when it came into office, asked for $9 billion to put in that fund, to fund it so it would be available to agencies as they needed it. That was a lot of money. It was not funded anywhere close to the $9 billion, and has been funded now at less than $1 billion from year to year, sometimes as low as $100 million, which, of course, is a lot of money. But it's not a lot of money when you're talking about the sums necessary to do the kinds of volume work that we're doing. And I appreciate, Mr. Commissioner, your answer to that, because I think that's the right answer. And I'd be glad to join my friend and this committee in looking at that Technological Modernization Fund, because the IRS has had that same problem, not having the money. And I, of course, echo how inefficient and how costly to the American taxpayer is the CRs. The fact that we don't do our work on time, passing discreetly 12 appropriation bills so that our agencies know what funds they have prior to the beginning of a fiscal year, costs us literally billions of dollars and extraordinarily inefficient. Mr. Commissioner, I don't know that I have a question for you, but I do congratulate you on the efforts that you have brought. You did that in Baltimore as well, on the statistical analysis of what was being done, how efficiently and effectively it was done, and how timely it was being done.
Performance management.
Yeah, and that had made a huge difference in the city when you were,
Thank you.
and also at the state level.
Yes, sir.
You did the same thing.
We were younger then.
Well, I'm still young. You're getting older. I'm trying to avoid that with not much success. But in any event, I want to thank you for bringing that managerial formula to that so you can answer questions, because the taxpayer deserves the questions. We are the agent of the taxpayer to get answers to that question. Are we getting more effective? Are we getting more efficiency? And very frankly, we have the same problem. I had the subcommittee, or the ranking member, at one point was the headed up the committee, of the committee that deals with IRS. And the same thing that you have talked about in terms of increasing population, increasing number of returns, increasing dollar values, and very steeply decreasing employees, which is why, for instance, overseeing millionaires' tax returns, which was at one time 9%, is now at 0.6%. 0.6% of those who file tax returns over $1 million are being audited. A substantially higher percentage of those who have returns under that. Why? because they're simple. And it's not employee intensive. And so that's not being done. And the same applies to, obviously, the very substantial increase as America ages
Right.
that your agency is required to deal with.
And that's why I've been so inspired, Mr. Chairman and Congressman, by the way the senior executive service and employees of Social Security have responded to performance management, the openness and transparency. I knew from afar, even before I was confirmed, that they have to collect a lot of data, our earnings ever since our first summer job. And so when in the confirmation hearing, Senator Cassidy actually asked me, he said, how quickly can you turn around historic data and real-time data on service delivery? I said, 60 days. He said, 60 days, we'll hold you to it. And we did. Now, it took OMB another 90 days to review it and say it was okay, but I got it to him in 60 days, and it's up on our website now. There is a new way of governing emerging in America, and it's all about openness. It's about transparency. It's about getting things done and delivering the goods of the republic that make a republic worth having.
In closing, and I've run out of my time, but Mr. Chairman, one of the things I think that we ought to do is look at the private sector because the pandemic changed the way many in the private sector did business. And they found that it was more efficient to be off-site than on-site. And in fact, if we made that comparison, I think it would be instructive to us as you deal with the concerns that we all have about how effectively off-site work is for the American people, or are people off-site and not doing the work that we expect them to do.
Right, the productivity numbers seem to be are the best thing to look at.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner O'Malley,
Yes, sir.
pleasure to meet you, sir.
Pleasure to meet you.
Since the first Biden-Harris administration's appointee took office in July 2021, processing times for Social Security disability claims have increased from 165 days cumulative to over 231 days nationally for FY24, while your agency has received substantial funding increases. And this is according to your own data.
Yes, sir.
When I look at that 231-day figure, for example, it says that the total cumulative average processing time for initial disability claims, which is 231 days for FY24, included 21 and a half days for Social Security field offices, 186.2 days at state DDS offices, and 23.4 days at other parts of the application process. And the data for FY24 is from the Social Security's fiscal year 2024 actual performance publication. So these are your numbers.
Yes, sir.
All right. Do you agree with them?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, fantastic. So what is the current regulatory requirement for state? What is the current regulatory requirement for days?
Oh, for days?
For initial processing of disability claims, excuse me.
There is none, but historically, before the staffing reductions, we were hitting it at about 120-day average. In Maryland, Maryland, they're over 366 today.
Yeah, I know Maryland, I think, is...
Pretty bad. South Carolina's the worst.
Yeah, it is. Well, actually, there is a requirement, sir, and it's 20 CFR 404.1642 for state, and that is 49.5 days for DDS in state, and that's in the regs. All right, I'm surprised you don't know that, sir. So, your FY25 goal.
What do those regs state to? I've never ever heard that number.
All right.
But thank you. I learn something new every day in this job, and I have 10 more days to learn.
Well, I wish you well on where you're going, sir.
Thank you.
Now, your FY24-25 priority goals, all right, say by September, and this is, again, your
Yes, sir.
from your
Oh,
agency.
I live and breathe it every day.
Okay, by September 30th, 2025, achieve an average processing time for initial disability claims of 215 days. 215 days is a lot compared to the statutory requirement of 49.5 plus, now granted that doesn't include The 21.5, that doesn't include the Social Security field offices or the other parts of the application process, but
Right.
that pales in comparison to what the state requires or what the state processing times are. So my question to you is, what is your plan to reduce these wait times in each area?
Yes, sir. We have a whole plan on it. In fact, we have a Tiger team. There's 15 main actions that the Tiger team has proposed, and you know, one of those action items is something they asked me to ask of all of you, which is to allow us to put the medical authorization form right in the front of the application, because it causes a lot of friction, a lot of wasted time. But there's others as well, and I'm glad to share those with you. This is one of the top 3 priorities that the president asked me to throw myself at. One of them was 1-800 number. We wrestled that one to the ground. Still struggle with it when peak times like COLA. So we got that from an hour wait time down to 12 and a half minutes. The overpayment thing, we did that by April. Nobody has 100% of their overpayments anymore. But the disability one is tough. It is a huge challenge and process improvement, and we're trying to do it with more applicants than we've ever had, but staffing reduced to a 50-year low. As you rightly pointed out, there are a few steps in the process. One of them is to get the person with the disability into the field office right away.
That means that there have to be people manning the field
Yes, sir.
office,
And on that
which goes
score-
back, well, hold on, which goes back to Chairman's question about, you know, the fact that people are not in the field offices. If 3 days out of the week is the requirement, then why is it not 5 days out of the week?
This graph shows that we only got, at the beginning of the year, only 46% of disability applicants. We got into a field office within the 28 days, a goal we set for ourselves. Now it's up to 64. So another trend moving in the right direction. But you see, the biggest part, and my graph agrees with your graph.
Okay.
This is a database conversation. This is the part where the biggest time frame comes and where the variation is across the 50 states. So we look at that, and then when we have the few new hires, once you all pass the CR, that we can do. That's why this anomaly funding is so important. We need that anomaly funding to shore up the states so that they can process these. But another point is we created a federal cadre, and because our workforce is portable and the internet, we are bailing out states from other places.
I mean, you're responsible for funding the states, correct?
Yes, we are.
Oh, you are. Okay. Now, since
I just
2021,
administer your will, but you're the one responsible for funding the states.
well, from the money that the Social Security Administration receives, they fund the states. You know, and in the last 3 years, in 2021, you received a $400 million increase. In 2022, you received a $750 million increase. All right. In 2024, $100 million increase. Those are substantial increases. I mean, we're talking,
I see the
you know, $1.2 billion in the last 3 years.
Yeah,
That's a lot of money.
Our agency has big numbers. Here's the thing that throws us, and I really appreciate your question, and this confuses a lot of people. Our agency, because of our size, has fixed costs that go up every year by $600 million. What are those fixed costs? Rent, even though we've reduced by 3 million square feet the office we occupy. So when it goes up every year by 600 million for healthcare, for cost of living increases for employees, for the guards, the security guards to protect our people when they come to those reception areas, that means that any number that purports to increase our funding, like let's say for that 1 year where it went up by $100 million on a $14 billion budget, what you have to realize is that means with fixed costs going up and only getting another 100 million, we have to slam on the brakes in an agency that's 75% staff, including the DDS staff, and let the grim reaper of attrition reduce the size of our workforce.
Well-
so in order just to keep our nose above the water, we need at least an additional $600 million just to cover the flat costs. And the only of the 3 things that are here, I mean, I'm grateful that the Senate increased by $500 million. You voted to cut us by $500 million, but really it's only the president's that starts to get us out of that hole. So that's why the anomaly
Well,
would be so important.
I have
That
a
very
recommendation
graph
for you
have.
then. You know, perhaps it would be a good idea, you know, if your costs are going up $600 million every year, Perhaps that y'all should get together with the new agency, the Department of Government Efficiency, and maybe Elon Musk and Vivek can help you guys kind of trim that and make sure that doesn't.
And buy some Bitcoin of the same name.
I yield back.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner. It's nice to come to a hearing when you've got someone who's so unbelievably competent in the position, who can explain things like you are, so appreciate it. Yeah, your graph pretty much said everything. You're at a 50-year low of employees with a record number of beneficiaries, and we're not giving you any money, and we're trying to expect different results. And yet, through going on Amazon Web, you've done this new development where you're tracking people literally minute by minute.
Yeah, it's beautiful to see.
Never had before. Couldn't be any more
we were so
efficient.
blind before.
When you figure out what's on their coffee mug at home, then we'll really get somewhere, I guess. But I mean, you're getting to a level of efficiency that's off the chart. So what I'd rather ask you a couple questions about, just from your experience, because you're leaving in 10 days, is 40% of seniors live exclusively off of Social Security. Best programs that any of my constituents call me about are Social Security and Medicare. Medicare, we got some challenges with Medicare Advantage. I'm not going to ask you about that. That's not your purview. But on this, I have two questions. One, cost of living adjustment. A lot of organizations have suggested we go to a CPI-E, something that recognizes expenses that seniors actually have.
Right.
I'd love to get your opinion on that. And then secondly, the Republican Study Committee, Project 2025, a number of other politicians have recommended raising the retirement age from 67 to 69. I'm someone who has a union printing shop, work with a lot of people in the trades. You're not going to still be laying brick and doing a lot of work at those ages. It's impractical to suggest something like that. I'm assuming you guys may have looked at some of that, since there has been conversation around it. I'd love to hear your thoughts about raising, not only is it a real cut to people in their benefits by doing that, but practically, what does that mean? And what other type of benefits are we going to have to offer people for disability, et cetera, because you're asking someone to work in an area maybe they can't still work in? So if you could address the CPI-E and then this issue of raising the age.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome questions. CPIE is an index that acknowledges the fact that seniors have to pay a lot more for a lot of things that younger people don't. Primarily, prescription drugs, perhaps some ambulatory services to get around. And that would be a better way to go. It would be a better way to go, and so I'll just say that. It would be fairer. We need to, 80% of Americans believe we should actually strengthen and expand Social Security benefits. 80%. I mean, even in a very polarized and divided time. I mean, there's more trust in this program in America than any other program, except the Department of Interior. We're second only to Smokey the Bear. So 80% of Americans want it to be sustained, made stronger, and an increase in benefits. My heart goes out to seniors. In 1 month, they're going to receive a COLA increase of 2.5%, and the next month, they're going to receive a notice that their Medicare is going up. So we need to strengthen Social Security, not weaken it. In terms of, this is a debate that goes on. It happened a lot in 1982. They raised the retirement age. The key that the actuaries look at is our life expectancy after we retire. So that's what the actuaries calculate in. And it is a fact, as you've said, that people who work outdoors, who work with their hands, who do very physical work, have a lower life expectancy. So what you're actually doing is reducing their benefit if you don't allow them to apply at the age they can apply right now. I mean, somebody like Elon Musk or Warren Buffett is going to live a lot longer than a bricklayer or somebody that hauls, trash cans behind our homes twice a week. So I think the better proposal for Social Security's long-term health is actually to ask people when they're making more than $400,000 to start paying into it. And we talked about this. Like, all of us pay up to, last year was $168,800, and then we don't pay another penny into it. So as a practical matter, that means a nurse working at Johns Hopkins pays in every paycheck all through that year. But Warren Buffett stops paying after about the first 17 seconds after midnight in Anderson Cooper's show. And most people don't think that's fair.
If I could just do a follow-up to that. I know my time came on late, so I won't ask more than one question. I do appreciate that. I don't want to hold the meeting up. But What is the history of where that figure came in, that adjusts a little bit every year? Because,
Yeah.
and one thing I do disagree with the Biden administration on is, I know he said he had never raised taxes on anyone, under 400,000. So we have an arbitrary donut hole. Honestly, you just lift the cap, period, would be the easiest, most logical way to move forward. But what is that history? So I can
Yeah, the
understand
history of that, very interesting. I didn't know this until I got to the agency. Back in that famous era when Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill had a beer and decided with Howard Baker to extend the long-term solvency of the program, they asked the actuaries and the bill drafters, they said, set a level of income that everybody pays into that will capture 90% of earnings in the United States. And they did, because they needed to build up that surplus reserve for us baby boomers. And however, after they did that, other changes to the tax code created an extreme income inequality in terms of where dollars were earned across that earning spectrum, thereby pushing more dollars to the top 6% of the highest earners and out of the bracket of that 168,000 and adjusted every year bracket. So instead of us, we the people, the Republic, capturing 90% of earnings, we ended up only capturing 81% of earnings. And that's why that so-called solvency date, more accurately, the depletion of the built-up reserve, is going to happen 15, 20 years before they thought it would when they did that 75-year contract. Did that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate that. I didn't know that history. And I'll yield
I didn't
back
know it
because I know my time started late on there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good to see you again, Governor.
Good to see you, Congressman.
Let me ask, and I asked you, I think, when you first took the job, something I had asked the previous commissioner of, which is the Social Security Disability Income Program and the reevaluations. And at that time, I think I had told you when I first met, this must be 12 years ago, the commissioner at that time said, well, we don't have the ability to re-examine it every 5 years, which is like what every other private disability company would do. I mean, they do not give lifelong disability. They reevaluate disability. Because look, in this day of medical breakthroughs, I mean, you could have someone who's disabled this year, 5 years from now, they're actually able to go to work. Are we able to reevaluate on a routine basis the SSDI recipients?
Yes, sir, we are. It's a challenge, but we do it. And we also, and we've gotten better at using the data to target the frequency of those reevaluations. So if medical improvement is likely, you get reviewed like every 18 months. If it's possible, every 3 to 5 years. If it's very unlikely, every 7 years.
Okay, so it's what I'll call a sliding scale, huh?
Sliding
It
scale
depends
based on
okay.
kind of the diagnosis of that case. Yes,
Right,
sir.
but that determination when to reevaluate's made at the initial determination. Because again, if you account for medical advances, you're like, well, if at the beginning you said, this is a hopeless case, maybe it's not hopeless 5 years from now, and because the cost is so high, and as you know, an accelerating cost in the program.
Right. I do believe that determination is made upon effectuation. When that last tranche in that chart that was they put the FO2 time after we effectuate it, that's when we then put it in the calendar for either the 1 year or 18-month review, 3 to 5 or 7, and then they come up like on a tickler file.
So the longest would be 7. You say. I mean, everyone is reevaluated at some point.
Everybody is reevaluated at some point.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And then sometimes, if there's a change in earnings, there is so much complexity to this program. On disability, some people are receiving a disability, but they are also working. And we want people to go back to work, but if they work over a certain time, they can hit a cliff. So there's some nuances to it. But yes, sir, it's basically in those 3 tranches, everybody gets reviewed.
And those cliffs would require statutory changes?
Yes, sir. If you could do that, that would be great.
Okay.
I mean, we shouldn't discourage people from
Correct.
working.
No, you're
And they
absolutely
lose,
right.
the
And
thing that bothers them most, the thing that's most tragic, is if they hit that cliff, they lose their health insurance.
yeah, no. And these cliffs exist everywhere. Now that I'm on Medicare, the cliffs for the
Can I tell you about one other thing
premium,
where we
sure.
spend millions of dollars chasing nickels from poor people's pockets? SSI. It is 40% of our administrative effort, and it is only 4% of our benefits. And what we put poor people through to report their earnings every month until a recent regulatory change, we used to deduct from a paltry $794.
I saw that in your testimony, right.
We used to deduct $130 if they lived with somebody that loved them, that bought them groceries.
Right.
So
No, I saw that. And
we spend so much money,
congratulations on that.
and that's, we have to review them every month.
So just say, I don't want to go over. We had a presentation from Eric Schmidt last night, former CEO of Google, who kind of indicated that the federal government's really bad at software updates. Productivity, because the argument to say, well, we're doing more work with the same number or fewer employees, well, that's in the private sector, you go, okay, we need an increase in productivity. Is there the potential for increase in productivity by changing the way you do business, allowing, say, machines, AI, software, something to improve the productivity?
Yes, sir. There absolutely is. We talked a little earlier about this agency hasn't had a true modernization shot since like Walter Cronkite reported on it back in the 60s. We need a commitment of, it's a big agency, but every single person, every little baby born in America gets a Social Security number from Wabash Avenue. So a $5 billion one-time capital investment that we would then have 4 years to properly implement and execute, that's the way to go. But we don't always do software bad. When we did the cutover from the Verizon system to AWS Connect, that finally gave us the platform for a future customer service, customer relations management system on the front end of the funnel. And we did it all in one day, August 22nd, without a bump. And we also created an automated tool for Medicare-only applications, which reduce processing time from 8 minutes to 8 seconds, and then stops if there's an anomaly that the agent has to look at because maybe somebody filled out the application wrong.
Yeah, I saw that in your testimony too. Good. Look, that's the wave of the future.
Yes,
so
sir.
We have to look at that, and I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman.
Ms. Frankel.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for your service. I think the new administration would probably be smart to keep you on. You may not want to, but that's my opinion. I want to follow up, Mr. Harris, and I don't usually think on the same wavelength, but today we are, somewhat. Because I live in Palm Beach County. We have a lot of seniors, 350,000 of folks in our county are on Social Security. Their average wait times, at least last year, on the phone waiting was 40 minutes to an hour, and 343 days for an initial disability benefit determination. I want to talk about the processing. Are you considering or using artificial intelligence to help process disability claims?
There's a lot. It seems like we can't ever have a conversation without talking about AI, artificial intelligence. I'm not a tech expert, but I play one on TV. I can tell you that what we have is more akin to, there's two things that we have, or two sides of the same tool. We created before COVID a tool called Imagine. Because of electronic health records, the volume of the health records that those initial disability determination examiners have to go through, and they're required by statute to read every page, can be now what they call Section F is up to 1,000 pages, 1,500 pages. So we do have a tool that now curates that almost like a search engine and then tells the disability examiner the pages that match the medical listing are these 23 pages. And oh, by the way, even though this wasn't in the application, this person may have another medically listed, disability that you'll find on these pages. And so that's been a huge time saver. Initially, coming out of COVID with people, only 25% of our examiners were actually using that tool.
So let me just interrupt you a second.
Now 64%
Let
are.
me just interrupt you.
Sure.
Thank you. That sounds like a good first step, but it seems, let me ask you this. Do you have a consultant, or who do you use to actually advise the agency now how to use artificial intelligence? Is there somebody doing that?
We
Or,
have-
or are you talking to a bot chat yourself, a chat bot yourself? I
Chatbot?
mean,
Well, we actually, one of the reasons we've been able to get that huge wait time down on the 800 number also has to do with artificial intelligence. In fact,
okay, well,
we
I
put a chatbot
I
on
need,
the
wait
front
a
of it.
minute, I need you to answer my question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Because I would like to know how much this would cost, because I tell you, I really do think that this could help you.
Absolutely.
And people shouldn't be worried they're going to lose their job. This is a tool, okay? Do you have any idea what would it cost for the agency to have a real consultant in the area of artificial intelligence to come in and modernize the efficiency of the process? Because it seems to me, just telling your people what page to look at, I'll tell you what, you could tell
I've
that.
got more.
Okay.
I've got more.
Well, do you have?
Yeah, we do. We draw on people. We have a lot of good contractors, consultants. We could use some more people to implement these great ideas. But one of the things we did, so much of our stuff is regulatory, what the agency called POMs, like thousands of policies that a technician has to be able to pull up. We put AI on top of that. And that is allowing our agents to do their work a lot faster. So there's a whole lot of areas where we could do it. We do have experts. What we don't have is money.
Okay, so what I would suggest is you match your need to the money,
Yes.
because that could really, I don't know, I don't know whether you can do it in the next 10 days.
I will provide you a follow-up, because another one of the things is to take that Imagine tool from the front end and actually use it in the ALJ. Another part is to use AI in order to come up with better first drafts for the decision writers who have to write these disability determinations on the back end. So there are all sorts of areas where what I call enhanced automation, intelligent systems can do it. I hesitate to say AI because you all don't want a machine making a determination.
Well,
But you do want it to improve the processing. I understand what you say.
Don't assume what I'm thinking. All right?
Yes, ma'am.
But what I would like is some feedback on what it would cost to really optimize as a tool. It's not, listen, it's not going to get rid of, people shouldn't get worried we're trying to get rid of workers. This is really a tool to help workers. If you could give me a response on how we could do it, how much it would cost, I think that's something, I know I would be interested. Maybe I could work with Mr. Harris on the project.
Yeah, I will be glad to provide that. We've been given a lot of thought, and we're also in motion on a lot of things, and I would be glad to provide that for you. Better tools.
Thank you, and best,
Thank you.
best
I
to
understood
you.
what you were saying.
Best to you.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here with us today. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that probably your agency touches and deals with my constituents more than any other part of the federal government. I have tens of thousands of seniors in my district, and this is what I hear about the most from that community. And I specifically am interested in hearing how you plan to continue to decrease, and you've talked a little bit about this, so let me just get this out there, and then I'll do a more specific question. But decrease wait times, increase efficiency, and how you plan to fully staff the agency. I couldn't agree more with what you said in your testimony, and here you repeated it as well, that it's time to give the taxpayers the customer service they deserve and that they have already paid for. So in the sense of customer service, in the rural parts of my district, which is in terms of land mass of my district, this is the largest part of my district. Obviously, the urban area has the majority of people, where a lot of my seniors are as well. But in terms of the rural area, that's the largest land mass of my district. My seniors have to travel over an hour to the nearest SSA office. What is the agency doing to address the customer service needs of rural seniors and those with disabilities who may have trouble physically accessing facilities and at the same time may have challenges with technology or some of the other things that you may offer? So let's start with that one.
Yes, sir. And it's also a challenge. Also a challenge in Native American reservations as well, remote areas. We're doing a lot more with phone conferencing, also with teleservice, the Zoom sorts of things. It's There are 1,211 field offices. The ones that are at the greatest risk of imploding with continued attrition and downward movement of staff are the rural areas. Because if in a rural office, for example, you only have a staff of 7 and 4 of them say, I've had it, the workload's too much, I'm out of here, that office might lose. I mean, the Grim Reaper doesn't care if that office loses all of its Title II experts. If it doesn't have a Title II experts, we're not like the United States Marine Corps where we can tell somebody in Phoenix, you're now going out there, because they'll say, no, I'm not. I'm going to an easier job with less work. So it's a real challenge in the rural areas, which is why the anomaly in the CR would be so very, very important. I never know from one night to another when I'm going to get a call that says this field office might implode. We got to try to flex.
Can we talk about the staffing here for a bit as well? So, what would you say is the primary reason for the shortage in staff? And in rural areas, I can imagine that is attracting people to those job sites potentially. Is it pay? Is it workload? And on the same note, what are the competing industries with that SSA finds itself losing for top talent?
Yeah, thank you. The biggest driver to the demoralization of this agency is their sense that none of you care what they do. And they see their workloads growing. So in the FEV surveys, the Federal Employee Viewpoint surveys that they do every year, until I help pick them up off the mat and remind them of their true selves, our agency listed itself the worst place to work in the federal government. And that's a stunning decline from 12 years ago when they rated themselves one of the best places to work. But that's a reflection of the fact that their workload's been going up, 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 and the number of colleagues around them going down, down, down. So a lot of people in these field offices ask themselves every day, am I going to be the last one here to turn off the lights? So it's really the workload that stresses people out. Where do they go? They go to insurance companies that have simpler programs to process claims. They go to the VA, where they can get paid a lot more and handle simpler claims. They go to any number of places. I mean, a starting salary for somebody in our agency is around $45,000, and there's a lot of training and complexity. So they go to easier jobs with less work. That's what's happened. I do believe that if you were to get our funding back up to that 1.2%, and the anomaly here would be a step in the right direction, I believe simply stopping the downward slide of fewer and fewer staff and bringing it up would help us enormously on retention. In fact, last year to this year, we had the biggest uptick in participation in the FEV survey of the history of the FEV survey of any agency. Our leaders' lead score went up 5. Our engagement score went up 3, and that's squares with the fact that our productivity went up 6.2%.
I'm out of time, and I don't want to go over. And I don't mean to interrupt you. As much as I hear the statistics of the improvements, it doesn't reflect what I'm hearing from my constituents when they call into frustrations with your agency. And as I learn more about this, and listen, I'm completing my freshman year, so I still have a lot to learn. But I'll tell you this: when I look at people that are working for our government, I'm very impressed with their dedication, and I'm grateful for them, from Border Patrol agents to what you all do as well. At the same time, the morale issue can come from a lot of places, and we do care. We do care about our constituents and our seniors, and we do care about the workforce there as well. We want to make sure that it's effective, that it's efficient, and that the leadership also that they're under reflects what you're saying here today. So as I look at the potential shortage of staff here, it can come from a lot of places, including leadership within the agency. So we want to make sure that when they turn off those lights, as you said, when they leave, it's not just their home light from working at home, it's also that they're showing up to work and that they're executing on what the mandate is from the American people. So with that, Chairman, I yield back.
Yeah, these are some of the hardest working people I've ever worked with. And to be very clear, Mr. Chairman, we have turned this ship around, and it is headed in a better direction. But we are not back to the high level of customer service we had before our staffing was reduced by Congress to a 50-year low.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Thank you for what has been a very informational exchange with you. Appreciate your advocacy and the degree to which you know the nuts and bolts of our program. Social Security is the biggest anti-poverty program ever. And it is not a program that enriches the lazy. It is not a program that enriches the already rich, although they get Social Security, and that's laughable. But you all have to go through so many hoops to justify very basic, fundamental survival benefits to individuals, whether it's Social Security benefits, whether or not it's SSI, whether or not it's DI. I would like to know a couple of things. Number one, do you have data on the amount, collective aggregate benefits that are paid out under each of those three programs for the 71 or 72 million? You don't have to give it to me now. I just want to
do.
know it.
I do.
And because the information I have is like as of 2023, there were over 71 million people on Social Security benefits.
Yes.
There were 9.2 million on disability and 7.5 million on SSI.
Yes. And some people duly on both.
Uh-huh. I mean, I would just like to understand how much is actually going out to over 80 million people in the United States of America, and why you got to jump through so many hoops when we give every very successful, very enriched corporations and people money and don't ask a damn thing of them.
Yeah, I think your numbers were pretty spot on there. I tell you, one of the areas where we really are forced to make the employees and the recipients, some of our poorest fellow citizens, jump through hoops, stand on their head, gargle peanut butter, whistle the battle hymn of the Republic, is on SSI.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I mean, the millions we spend trying to claw back nickels out of poor people's pockets is appalling. And often, people would say to me, why don't you simplify SSI? Well, Congress needs to simplify SSI. Congressman, you talked about the reviews, 1, 3. We review SSI every month. Isn't that crazy? It's 4% of our benefits, and we spend 38% of our overhead reviewing the poorest of poor people. If you all could change that, and we do it only once a year,
So,
we would save so much money.
but quickly, do you have those figures?
Yes, ma'am. I got enough figures to choke a donkey. I'll be glad to get those to you afterwards.
Okay, all right. The other thing is that everyone's asked a question about an area that I was interested in, whether it's raising the retirement age or whatever, or COLAs or whatever. What is clear to me is that my Republican colleagues want to talk about dismembering the system that provides the survival benefits to those in greatest need, at the same time, falsely communicate to their constituents that they give a damn about them. And I'm sick of that duplicity. I'm sick of that hypocrisy. And I'm going to use my mouth, as long as I have it, to raise that issue, the hypocrisy of it. At the end of the day, you ask for money to be able to deliver survival services to people in this country. This is the United States of America, the richest country in the world. And I am so sick of people who have it all not wanting to share any of it with those in greatest need. So they can take their Christian hypocrisy, their public service hypocrisy, and they can put it someplace where the sun doesn't shine on it. I yield back.
Be happy to. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I want to just say a thank you to you, Governor, about, I won't go into it, what you have done with regard to overpayments. You know that was a specific issue that I was faced with one of my constituents. much appreciate that. And I would just say to my colleague, you will obviously provide her with information, but to Congresswoman Watson Coleman, with New Jersey 12, almost 1.7 million beneficiaries, received $3.36 billion in monthly benefits, 163,000 SSI recipients. So this is for every single district, and I think everybody needs to see this, to see what is at stake if we do not provide the funding that is required to make sure that this agency can carry out its mission. I want to say a thank you to you, and thank you for meeting with both sides of the aisle. You're really terrific in doing that. I know that Congressman Clyde is gone, but he used data to convey his concerns. I would encourage, and I'll mention it to him, I would encourage looking at the data that's in your testimony, and that's about the historic increase in the number of beneficiaries and the declining budget, despite historic benefit outlays. That's the issue is that, you can't achieve more with less, and you are trying desperately to achieve more with less and less. You noted the improvements that we're able to make, the increases in productivity that came when you were able to provide you with the funding. What matters to me most is the productivity. That's, I think, what's critical, and how we're serving the American public. That's what this agency is about. We know we've got the route to the benefits is through this portal, if you will, and that's where it goes. And quite frankly, in spite of the GOP's efforts to starve SSA, the improvements you have made to the agency are notable. The data is very, very helpful. You spelled out what the cuts would mean. And I think that that's critically important for us to really understand and to get the word out as to what these cuts mean. It is about the field offices. It's about delay in the claims. And I will just say, because I agree with my colleague from New Jersey, as I said, if you're going to cut to shreds this agency that really administers the program, then you've cut the program, and don't give me any of your rhetoric about that you're for saving Social Security, you believe in Social Security. Well, you really don't. And quite frankly, that's been demonstrated in years past. And the public needs to know why there are delays and holdups and so forth.
You all could easily crater this agency, notwithstanding the progress of this year.
That's right. And so, listen, I just would leave with this. Look, we ought to be in the throes at this moment of trying to get the appropriations bills done and done by December 20th. And that's what we'll continue to work on. But thank you for everything that you have done, Governor, to take this agency from 0 maybe to 95, maybe not to 100 yet, but by God, that is the direction you're going in, and you've taken this agency, and it cannot fall to us to say no to that and not to continue what you have laid out. Thank you for being here, Governor.
Mr. Chairman, can I,
Gentleman's recognized.
thank you, gentlemen. I sit here, and I'm not in charge of Social Security except on this committee. I'm a ranking member on the committee that deals with another agency that I've already mentioned, the IRS. And the irony is that I hope you've heard me. The irony is this. We spend, as you pointed out, so much resources looking at the poorest people. Let me remind you, we went from 9% of checking millionaires to 0.6%. So we go in exactly the opposite direction depending upon your wealth. If your wealth is small, it's easy to look at it. And so we want to fund that to the hilt. But if your wealth is gargantuan, well, maybe not so much. That says something about the priorities, the morality, the common sense. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner, again, thank you for being here. We do appreciate your time, and while I'm not going to ask a question, I do want to mention, as I highlighted in my opening statement, that there is I think the agency has a lack of policy on overtime pay. As the Social Security Administration Inspector General found over 750 instances where the Social Security Administration paid employees for overtime on the exact same days the employee claimed paid leave. And some of these employees were even doubling their salaries. During this time, when I know you're asking for more, I do implore you to look at this and look at steps that you can take to develop a prudent overtime policy and during your few days that you're there. And again, we appreciate your service, but I do want to call that attention. I'd be remiss if I didn't, because that is something I think that does need to be looked into. And again, we thank you for your service and look forward to working with you in whatever capacity you find yourself next. And so all the best to you.
Thank you, Mr.
And the hearing is adjourned.